How can you handle a problem without filing lawsuits? As a business owner, how do I know where my vulnerabilities or where I have risk? I'm Wesley Henderson. I'm a business attorney located in Charleston, South Carolina. And today I'm here answering those questions and many others. Stick around. What are the most common lawsuits business gets? It's a really good question because if you know the problems, that can help you figure out how to prevent them. So the first big area would be what you call a breach of contract. So two parties say, here's what we're going to do for each other. One of them doesn't, and a lawsuit ensues. So it usually looks like, with most smaller businesses, it's something about payment. So, hey, you were supposed to pay me $10,000 for my services, and you didn't. You owe me that money. So basically suing for that payment. The other side is suing for not doing what you're supposed to in exchange for the money. So I pay a marketing company, $5,000 a month, and the services aren't actually provided. So then you're suing to either enforce those services, but usually once you're at the lawsuit, you don't want to, even keep working with them, or you're suing to get that money back. So that's a breach of contract. Any kind of deal that you might have with someone else and that party's not doing what they signed up for can lead to what you call a breach of contract. So we had a deal and you didn't do what you were supposed to. Another really big one is injuries. If I get injured, there's a personal injury type of lawsuit, not based on a contract, just based on you doing something that causes harm to me. Usually it's based on negligence. So your carelessness caused me harm. An example would be if, I have a delivery driver out here and they run a red light, boom, T-bone somebody. Well, an employee of mine caused injury because they did something negligent. You'll also see it with products. You put a product in the marketplace and it malfunctioned, harmed somebody. It's a product's liability, but still call it still be based on that injury type of case. You have someone in your store, they slip and fall. You have a fitness routine, they overextend themselves, and you have a good argument that they're here for fitness, but still they might sue you for that. A third area would be like using other people's IP, trademarks, taking information from their website, taking client lists, taking, usually coming from other employees or competitors, who owns what in that world. So those are some of those big ones, that breach of contract, injuries, and just kind of who owns what and suing over that. What can a business do to prevent these disputes? That's a great question. So let's talk about the breach of contract because it's the most preventable one. That is having excellent agreements in place. When I say excellent, I mean it's very clear about what each party does. You are making sure that with a good contract, you don't get scope creep from either side. You know exactly what each party's supposed to do. And then, if you're my client, I want you to have an attorney's fees clause, a late fees clause, these sort of things in there that give you the leverage you need to prevent the lawsuit, meaning, hey, I have got a slam dunk here and I will get my attorney's fees back so it gets more expensive for you. If you have any questions about those contracts, check out our legal bundle down below, or you can go to our website, sign up for our workshop. It gives you a ton of information about how legal contracts can help you. So that's just having really good contracts. The injury one is training your employees and making sure that you are doing everything that you're supposed to. If someone complains about a railing being wobbly, you go fix it. So you have to be a really responsible owner. The IP is also, the trademark stuff is back to having the right contracts in place. Is an employee that leaves allowed to use the client list or not? So just being really clear with everyone you're working with on expectations. That's why contracts are so good. Gets rid of all these discussions. What kind of lawsuits do businesses get from employees? So the two most common lawsuits you're gonna see from employees will be wages, not being paid for hours worked, or maybe being called an independent contractor when you're really an employee. But it's usually something about, hey, I worked and I didn't get paid. We represent a lot of employers, and I say never cut it close on this one. Always make sure you're paying everyone for every single hour worked. Really important. And then also discriminatory kind of things, treating someone different than someone else, any sort of discrimination based on a protected class. That's another big area. Do you ever see lawsuits with partners of a business? Unfortunately, yes, I am one as well. So I have a extra good insight. Working with other people in a business can be challenging. It can be really rewarding because if you're working well together, you are maximizing that person's skill set, your skill set, whoever else is involved. But unfortunately, it doesn't always go that way. And there will be lawsuits. First, you're looking at that operating agreement. If you don't have one, it adds a lot of complication to it. A lot of times what you're seeing when it gets this far is someone saying, oh, I'm showing up and doing everything and that other person's not doing anything, which may or may not be true depending on which side you're talking to, but that's usually some sort of, I'm working so hard, other person's riding coattails. That's at least how it starts. Also, you might see someone using the company card for a lot of cool trips and personal things. And so you have questions about misappropriating company property. And then a lot of times it's just a power struggle. Two people aren't getting along and they need to figure out how to navigate their way out of it so that someone can maximize the value of the business, even buying someone out, both selling it, that sort of thing. How can you handle a problem without filing a lawsuit? It's a good question. A lot of this will depend on getting the right personality for your lawyer. Some lawyers are just trained to go in and fire away, and that can kind of make things go a lot bigger, meaning super, super aggressive, bulldog, and a lot of times you want that. And a lot of times we'll get there as well and get really firm. But whenever we're starting a dispute, I try to listen so I can hear the perspective of the other side and hear an opportunity for resolution. It isn't there often, but a lot of times it is. A lot of times we save our clients lots and lots and lots and lots of legal fees by listening for an opportunity for a resolution. So we try to go in, listen, explain our side. I usually welcome information. I say, help me understand where you're coming from and why you think that. And then we've got pretty good, clear facts on the table that helps people kind of realize how expensive this will be, realize the weaknesses in their arguments, and try to get them resolved. We think of it business-minded. We own a business. It's rarely in the interest of a business to be in a distracting lawsuit for several years. So we try hard on the front end to work hard in good faith to go get that resolution. If we can't, then we take that a different route. But we do try on the front end. So usually you start with what's called a demand letter. Say, here, this is where we're at. This is why we think this. You'd like to have an explanation for why we think we're owed what we are owed, what the wrongdoing was, that sort of stuff. Be really clear, articulate it well. You're not giving away anything that you shouldn't. It's just being clear and direct. And then I usually say, you tell me what I'm missing. Tell me why I'm wrong about this. And if they can't, then they usually, we're able to get a favorable resolution because they'll just admit it, or there'll be some back and forth, some tough conversations, but some back and forth, and we can get it resolved. So usually you're trying to go in there and seeing, pushing your case hard, but letting them know we're listening if you want to get this resolved without the lawsuit. As a business owner, how do I know where my vulnerabilities or where I have risk? That's a really good question. You need to think about some of those lawsuits I mentioned before, like what could someone sue you for? So if I'm a personal trainer, someone could sue me for getting injured. Someone could sue me for money back saying I didn't do a good job. If I'm a marketer, they could sue me for not doing what I said I was going to do. Unlikely they're going to be able to sue me for lost profits unless there was some sort of fraud or something like that. So you want to look at the types of things someone could get mad at you about. If it involves a physical injury, you want to have liability coverage to protect you. A lot of times they'll be required if you've got a lease or if you're certified, but anytime there's an injury that could happen based on what you're doing, you want to have liability coverage because the injury lawsuits can be so expensive because you're looking at medical bills, and if someone's got an injured back, that diminishes their value of their life and ability to make an income for potentially 30 years. So really important to kind of write those down, utilize several things to minimize those. So your conduct, your standards, like how well you're delivering your service. Contracts are extremely important. Insurance, and then making sure you got an LLC. If you're watching this video and you don't have an LLC, go get one. It's kind of your catch-all. How does insurance work in a lawsuit? It's a really good question. So insurance works in a lawsuit by if they're covering it. So let's say there's a liability coverage for the fitness example, and you've got coverage, say if someone gets injured while you're instructing. So one, you'll be defending saying, my negligence didn't cause this. But the insurance steps in, if they're covering you, and pays the lawyer. You don't pay the lawyer anything. And then whatever your limits are is how much they will negotiate. So let's say you have $100,000 limits. They have up to $100,000 to settle it, and then you pay anything over that. If there's a verdict for $400,000, your LLC would be paying the additional $300,000. Usually the insurance company is trying to settle within those limits, and so that it goes away. The benefits you've got is there's a pocket of money that someone can write for you, and then you're also not paying the lawyer. And the lawyer, they're trying to protect their client and you're the insured, but they're trying to make sure that this gets resolved and they pay the lawyer as little as possible. Essentially, they're trying to make their money. But it's a really good deal for you if you do get sued. So you want to make sure that you've got that coverage because it saves you from this sort of catastrophic events. If you don't have the coverage, then you're looking at writing that check on your own through your LLC and having to pay a lawyer the entire time. And that stuff gets very, very, very expensive. Tips for avoiding disputes just from my practice. So the biggest thing, on at least the low-hanging fruit, is just making sure you're super clear on your agreements. Again, go to the legal bundle if you don't have contracts, and there's tutorials that'll take you through it. But one of the biggest things is one party thinks that the deal was different than this party. Most of the time, they're not even lying. They're just interpreted it differently because they have a different set of experiences. There's email saying something. There's phone calls, text messages. So getting clarity in one single moment where you get the contract signed, say, forget everything else we've talked about, this is our deal. Getting that with everybody, your employees, your contractors, and definitely your clients, goes a long way. A part of that is a lot of times we'll have people with these great contracts and, oh, this one didn't get signed because that person didn't sign it. Well, don't work with that person. Every time almost that I have a client say, they didn't sign it and I worked with them anyway, they start calling me. So if they're not going to sign it, don't work with them. Do not do a single thing until you get something signed and you get some money. A tip for payment, we have what we call the four corners approach, which you'll see in most of our agreements. It's get money up front, have a trigger date for when that money is due. Then you need a late fee to kick in if it's not paid. And then finally, you need to get attorney's fees if you have to hire an attorney. So what that does is it drives urgency to that person paying you. And that's important because whoever owes you money probably owes other people money too. So you want to get urgency and the late fee and the attorney's fees. That means if you pay a lawyer $25,000 to collect the money, they got to pay that. Court has to award it, but if you have it in the contract, they almost always do. A few more little tips along that line is I always just recommend listen to your intuition. When someone doesn't seem aligned with your values or the type of services you provide or just your personality, don't work with them. Let them go find someone else that aligns better. That would go a long, long way for you. And then always we say the 24-hour rule. I'm sure you've heard something along these lines, but someone makes you mad about something, you type up this nasty email, let it sit overnight, read it. You can be firm. It's one of the things lawyers learn. I can be very firm without being unkind. Always be professional and kind. Once it goes south, there's never getting it back. And that can end up costing you $50,000 in legal fees plus whatever else you could have avoided. So always give yourself, time to calm down and come from it. So hope that helps. Hopefully you stay away from these lawsuits. Use some of these tips and it'll help.